folks, welcome to the Rooftop. Trevor here. So one of the beers that I just think is super versatile is just your good old American Pale Ale. And I usually have one of those on tap almost all the time. Right now I'm getting pretty low on the one that I have on tap, and so it's time to replenish what I have. And so today we're just going to be brewing a simple American Pale Ale. So one of the little tweaks that I'm going to do today for this brew day is I've been consistently getting, I know that with the mash in a bag approach, you're settling for lower efficiencies on your extraction of the sugars, the fermentable sugars that you're getting out of the grains. So there's obviously you can add a sparge step, which is going to rinse those sugars and get more efficiency. I like to keep it as simple as I can, so I'm not opposed to that. But what I'm going to do to try to eke out a little bit more efficiency is I'm actually going to take the gap on my mill from 0.038 to 0.030. And so the way you do that, and this is, I've got a monster mill. Essentially what you're going to do is you're going to loosen these thumb screws here, and then I've got a gap gauge here, which basically tells me exactly what I'm looking at, which is, like I said, 0.030. And then I'm going to simply put that down into the gap, and then I'm going to turn this left side, and then tighten that down, and then turn the right side. And you want to just do it until it's you can slide that in and out with a little bit of resistance, and then you should be good to go. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to use that 0.030 and just see if we can get a little bit better extraction, a little bit better efficiency from the amount of sugars that we're getting out of the grain. Alright, so we got everything ground up here, just milled that directly into the mash tun. Wanted to take a second to talk about the grain bill for this beer. So I've got 11.5 pounds of pale malt, and I've got 1.5 pounds of Crystal 10. I actually wanted to use some Crystal 20, but didn't have any, and so I've also added 4 ounces of extra dark English Crystal to give it a little bit more color and maybe just a little bit more of that crystal flavoring. And then I've also got a pound of wheat, flaked wheat, that we're doing in here as well. So hopefully the addition of this extra dark malt won't change the beer too much, but it'll be interesting to see how it turns out. Alright, so after heating this up, overshooting it, and then letting it cool off, and then undershooting it, and then heating it back up, we're finally pretty close to where we want to be. We're a little bit under, but I'm going to go ahead and transfer this over. So let's go ahead and get that going. So similar to my last brew day, I actually forgot to do the water additions before mashing in, but caught it right here the first few minutes. So I'm going to be doing 2.5 milliliters of lactic acid. I've got 2.5 grams of gypsum, and then 1.7 grams each of calcium chloride and Epsom salt, and those are calculated in brewing water on the yellow dry profile. We are at the end of the mash, so I'm going to run this off and get this going. There we go. I'm liking that color. It's looking really nice. All right, so we're getting ready almost to the boil. I just wanted to take a minute and talk about some readings I took. So the pre-boil gravity reading was 1048, 1049, somewhere around there. So still pretty low efficiency, right at about 60%. So I'm not sure that changing the gap on the grain mill did a lot of difference, but I don't want to change too many parameters from brew day to brew day, so I may just try cranking that down a little bit more and seeing what happens next time. So right before we get to the boil, I want to talk about the hop schedule. So I'm going to be doing some Cascade hops for this beer. So we're going to be doing 1.5 ounces of Cascade at 60 minutes. Then we're going to do 3/4 of an ounce, or 0.75 ounces of Cascade at 15 minutes, and then 0.75 at flame out, and then we're going to whirlpool that for probably 20 minutes, and then we'll do a dry hop charge of about an ounce in the fermenter, and then possibly another ounce in the keg. Alright, so we got a nice light boil going on, so I'm going to go ahead and do our 60-minute addition. Here's our 15-minute addition. Okay, we are at flame out. Oh, jeez. That was loud. Alright, here we go. Starting the whirlpool. Alright, so I whirlpooled for about 20 minutes. I've now got the water, rainwater going through. I'm sitting at about 76. I'd like to get that down to about 70. And then start to transfer into the fermenter. So hopefully we can get it down there pretty quick. It's awful hot out here, so we're awful warm, so let's see if we can get there. Alright, so we ended up getting down to 72, which I can live with. Got that going in now to the fermenter. Get that filled up, shake it around, and then there's our yeast that we've harvested from the last pale ale that I did. So we'll be pitching that in here in a minute. Alright, so we are in fermenter. I don't use this fermenter a lot, but it's been a while since I've actually done one in something clear that I can watch the fermentation, so that'll be fun to do that. So we're gonna give this a shake for about a minute, and then we're gonna throw that jar of harvested yeast on there. Tell you what, it's interesting. I put that yeast in there, and I filled it all the way to the brim, and I really had a hard time getting the lid off of it because I guess it was still fermenting even though it was in the refrigerator. So it kind of spewed everywhere. I'm actually hoping that I can drop that in there without having to scoop my hands in it, which isn't particularly sanitary even if I sanitize my hands, but we will see. So just aerate this a little bit more. Pitch the yeast. Gorgeous day. All right. Back in the sanitizer for now. Our jar of yeast. Sanitize my hands and. All right. So, worked out. All fell in there. So, put the inside here with the sanitizer. Cap this off. And I'm just going to let this one sit inside. Ambient temperature is probably about 73, and I'm just going to let this do its thing. So maybe a little bit hot, but you know, it's a pale ale. It should be fine. So hopefully that'll take 5 to 6 days, and we'll have ourselves a beer soon. All right, so quick check-in on the pale ale. So I let that beer ferment for about 7 days. After 2.5, 3 days, I didn't see any airlock activity. Let it go for another 3 or 4 days until just to make sure that it was finished, and then I kegged the beer. I remembered why I don't use that that's clear plastic container very often. It's because I have to rack beers when I get beers out of that, and that's not a lot of fun. I can't really do a closed transfer with that, but it was fun to watch the fermentation, which I haven't done in a while. So kegged that beer. When I kegged it, I did another 2 ounces of dry hopping in the keg of Cascade, and it's been in there about 3 days. I did a quick taste just now just to see how it was carbonating. Carbonation is coming along fine. The Cascade is just huge floral, like just crazy floral up in your face, which is good. I was curious what that was going to taste like, but it's definitely very one note in this beer, and I'd like to get a little more layers to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to transfer the beer into another keg, and before I move the beer over, I'm going to put another mesh container of Simcoe hops in there to give it a little bit more piney, citrusy characters, and then hopefully that'll kind of balance out the Cascade a little bit, and we'll see how that final product is, but that's what I'm going to do right now. Alright, so I sanitized the keg, weighed out 2 ounces of Simcoe. Something I want to point out, when you use these things, I think it's important that you turn the top of these down so that the hops can get down to the bottom of the beer. That stick is down there, right? And so you want to make sure it's down there by the beer. So I'm going to do this, put the lid back on, I'm going to push this pale ale in here through CO2. I'm going to put use the 2 outlines to transfer the beer that way. So I'm going to do that now. Okay, so got the out on this side, the out on this side, got the gas on this side going over into a sanitizer bucket. Gonna push this on, and now we're moving the pale ale from the keg on this side to the keg on this side. Should be getting some bubbles out of here, and there we go. Thought I'd finish off the video with quick tasting. So color-wise, this is pretty dark, right? It's certainly past a pale, pale ale typical color. I don't think I've seen a commercial beer pale ale quite this dark. It's getting past orange, almost into the amber area. So just from a purely color standpoint, if I were to do this again with that extra dark crystal, I'd probably cut that in half, just so that it's not quite so dark. From a taste perspective, I really like what the Simcoe did to this beer. It really rounded out this beer to make it less one note with all that floral that I was getting from the Cascade, to give it a lot more tropical flavor. So just, I've been drinking on this beer for probably a few days now. So, on the nose, I'm still getting a little bit of that floral, maybe like a rose petal kind of thing. And then I'm also getting the Simcoe citrusiness, kind of like a candied pineapple, or maybe like a peachiness, I guess. And in the mid palate, in the taste, I'm getting a nice bitterness that's there, and it lingers toward the end. It's kind of weird. It's almost like a birthday cake kind of thing between the Simcoe and the Cascade, and maybe that dark crystal that's giving it that. But overall, it's pretty good. The one complaint I have about this is I do detect a little bit of oxidation in this beer, and it's probably due to fermenting in that PET bottle and then having to rack that out with a racking cane instead of being able to just gravity feed that into a keg and doing that as a close transfer. So oxidation, typically it's that papery kind of taste. kind of a coffee filter kind of taste, and that's what I'm getting, just a smidge in this beer. Most people probably wouldn't even notice, but I'm pretty critical of my own beers, and I just can kind of taste that in there. So it certainly doesn't cause me not to want to drink this beer, but it's definitely noticeable. So anyway, thanks for joining me on this brew day, and of course, subscribe, hit the like button, and give me your comments. If you've got thoughts about this recipe, this brew day, I'd love to chat with you and just connect over comments, and let me know what you think. All right, thanks. Cheers.